Which defensive player is trending up for the Dallas Cowboys? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We are answering your Twitter questions today, and let's jump right into it. The first one from Payson, he wants to say, what players are trending up to potentially be big contributors, difference makers for the playoff push, sort of like Daron Bland from last year?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, honestly, like a lot of the Cowboys kind of roster building philosophy is built on the idea that you get these kind of ring of players that start to really show up at the second half of the season as they start to get more and more experience. And I think, we've got a couple names that we could probably kick around here, but I think the first one I'd like to start at is a name that we've kind of thrown around a little bit and lots of people have been talking about online as well. And that's Tyler Smith. I think, we had an incredible game last week against the Rams. And part of the highlight of that was getting to watch someone like Tyler Smith work against someone like Aaron Donald. Now, obviously, we're kind of used to at this point seeing Zach Martin and Aaron Donald go against each other. That's appointment viewing. Absolutely. But Tyler Smith is in the conversation now with the way he's been playing, and some of the reps that he had against Donald were absolutely incredible. And I think you talk about what specifically is going to happen this week against the Eagles and against that stout interior defensive line. You're going to need a guy like Tyler Smith to kind of continue his play, ascending play, making his way towards Brandon Thorne, who's one of the best offensive line evaluators I think there is out there. Put him as the second team All-Pro, and Andrew Whitworth put him as his first team All-Pro so far this season at left guard. And I think, we need more of that kind of ascension based on who we're going to be playing the rest of the year, but also just to kind of see him in his second year take on that guard role after playing tackle last year and really just kind of running with it in a way that's going to lead to an All-Pro, hopefully, at the end of the year.
I saw somebody quote tweet the Brandon Thorne cut-up of Tyler Smith. And that was our own Micah Parsons said he's the best guard in football.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make a really good argument that he might be. According to Pro Football Focus, I think he's like number 2 right now. Yeah. I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal.
Whitworth actually on that podcast, compared his skill set and his athletic ability to Trent Williams. I mean, that's pretty high praise coming from another left tackle, right? Like to call somebody Trent Williams-esque. And I think you see it, right? He has unnatural power. It's very natural to him, but it's abnormal. And he has, all the athleticism. He can move really well. It's always been about technique for him. And what I think has really been surprising, even starting last year, was just how quickly he was able to get his technique from kind of rough to actually pretty decent and unlock a lot of that power.
I'm going to mention a name. Daron Bland. Is that fair? I mean, Daron Bland just continues to get better and better. And we're talking about like guys that could be even better, like in the second half of the season. Why not Daron Bland? I mean, he's basically has a year of experience now, like 16 total games or whatever, starting to not only make the interceptions, which we know he can do, but I'm telling you that the play that he made in the red zone on Cooper Kupp, there was two blockers in front of him. He slipped both blocks, made the tackle on Cooper Kupp, got the Cowboys off the field. I mean, there's a chance that he's just so clearly their best secondary player by the end of November. And he's the reason why the Cowboys are able to beat the Eagles. Like, I'm not saying he's going to shut down A.J. Brown, but what if he has, what if he limits Devontae Smith to 35 yards and has another interception or a couple key pass breakups? Why couldn't it just be Daron Bland again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're just getting more and more exposure here, and he's continued to grow as the weeks have gone on. I think that he took a jump between last year and this year in his consistency. And I think as he's getting more and more exposure to the outside, I think his consistency out there has gotten better and better. So, yeah, I mean, there certainly isn't any reason. I mean, his arrow has been pointing up, so I guess that's why we didn't necessarily mention him. But there isn't any reason he can't go even higher from where he is now by the end of the year. So obviously, he's a player that arrow is pointed in that direction. So I mean, we don't really know where his ceiling is at this point, but obviously, he's trending towards it.
I'll give you one more. Jake Ferguson. Now, Ferguson.
Yeah, I was just going to niche at him. That's such a great thing.
Ferguson doesn't have a game this year with over 50 receiving yards. His usage has been kind of spotty. I think he only has like 4 catches over the last 3 games. But you're starting to see the trust from Dak Prescott. The touchdown throw, I mean, he was covered the whole way. He was bracketed, and Dak trusted him to make the catch, and he did. I just wouldn't be surprised if we get to like Thanksgiving and after Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden – he's the guy every week that's getting the second most targets in the offense behind CeeDee Lamb. It's 7 or 8 catches a game for 65 yards. He's the primary red zone option. I think it's coming.
Yeah, I think so too, and I hope it is. And I've been asking for it for a little while, and I think we got a little bit more of it last week. I think ultimately, if he can continue to raise his floor to where it was previously, he can be Schultz with yak ability, right? Like that ability to kind of be that red zone reliable weapon that gets you the kind of targeting you expect most Dallas tight ends to be able to get, but the plus added bonus of being able to break tackles and turn a 6-yard gain into a 12-yard gain, So I agree. I think they'll start to feed him more. He'll continue to get better. I think he started out a little bit spotty. They fed him at a rate that they want, that I was happy with early, and it had kind of mixed results. The tight ends in general kind of had mixed results.
They struggled.
They've evened it out a lot now, I think, across the board. And I think they need to kind of reestablish the tight end in the offense, and we're going to see positive results with Jake Ferguson being the primary target of those numbers.
Last one before we move on. I really like what I saw from Rico Dowdle as a pass blocker last week against the Rams. I mean, he had multiple plays where he had some just stunned the linebackers right in the hole. I just wonder going forward as we get into, some of the we're going to have some bad weather games coming up. Maybe he just starts to get more and more work. I think he's looked awesome this year. I really do.
I really do too. I mean, I kind of jokingly made a suggestion that the Cowboys should trade for Ezekiel Elliott when it came available, but honestly, like there isn't room at the end at the spot because
Dowdle's just better.
Yeah, and if anything, you want to give Dowdle increased reps. I mean, not to take away from where Pollard is at this point, but I think it makes sense if you want to keep a guy who's coming off of a big injury fresh by the end of the year. You're going to want to give Dowdle more touches, and I think that he's shown you that there are even times when he's maybe a better choice, schematically for what they're trying to do, just because of his running style. So, yeah, he has been nothing but a positive player at this point. So, continuing to feed him the ball a little bit and giving Pollard some rest, I don't think you're going to see a huge downside. In fact, I think mixing it up might be good for your run game overall.
I think the Cowboys play like 5 games in November this year. I mean, it's a pretty brutal stretch. Tony Pollard already has a lot of work. They've given him a ton of carries and touches this year. I think leaning into Dowdle a little bit more, not giving him a ton of touches, but maybe 9 to 11 touches, letting him do some more work as a pass blocker. That could really help this Cowboys offense as we get on, to the second half of the season. Landon, I want to talk about the trade deadline because the Cowboys didn't do anything. Absolutely nothing. Was that a smart move? We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, each week we're going to provide you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. This week, it's Carolina Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard, who got the lead duties in Week 8 against the Texans, despite Miles Sanders being available. Although Hubbard struggled to get going in that matchup, he should find some more running room back at home against the Colts, against that front that's breaking down a little bit. The Panthers' power running back should yield better results, but Hubbard can also have a big impact in the passing game to deliver as an all-around fantasy sleeper. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows that a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same is true with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not your hard-earned cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Anitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineup, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. All right, Landon, let's get back to the questions. This one from Mark. He wants to know, did the Cowboys stand pat at the trade deadline because they feel like their roster isn't good enough to win it all and they don't want to give up future assets? Or was there just not a trade out there that was worth entertaining?
Yeah, it's both. I mean, I think we kind of get into this thought process that trades happen or don't happen because the Cowboys want them or don't want them to happen. And ultimately, that's not how trades work. Like, ultimately, trades work when two sides agree to trade assets and things happen. I think there's this misconception that because no trades got executed, that the Cowboys didn't make any phone calls. And I think part of that misconception is just people listening to Jerry Jones. Right?
I know that's not true.
Yeah.
The Cowboys absolutely made and received phone calls yesterday.
Absolutely. And to think that anything other than that happened for any one of the 32 other teams, if only to just deny trade offers, like, I think is ridiculous. And look, so the Cowboys didn't execute any of these trades, but I think it's because they didn't, think that any of these things will fit. I think if you could look at the players who did get traded, I don't know that they were necessarily fits for what the Cowboys were doing, especially at some of the prices that were going around.
I will say, just having said that, I would have done the Chase Young trade for a third-round pick. There's no way Washington was ever trading Chase Young to Dallas for a third-round pick. They just weren't.
Yeah, and honestly, even then, like, you've got a lot of mouths there already. It's like
I would have done it though. I mean, at that price, because you're renting him for a half a season, and then you're picking up a comp pick when he's done with this year.
I think it's close. I mean, because the truth of the matter is you're still paying him. You also got to pay him whatever you got to pay him. Look. Bottom line is that there were no clear-cut deals. The Cowboys basically had traded away a lot of the assets they could have used for some of these trade deadline deals already, which didn't preclude them from using other assets, but it just like made, I think, negotiating some of these deals for trades a little bit more difficult just without the assets, right?
Well, because they used 4 of their day 3 picks to acquire Trey Lance, Jonathan Hankins last year, Stephon Gilmore, and Brandon Cooks. That's where all your trade assets went.
So I know some people are going to get angry because, and I've already seen it, people are getting angry because there is spin out there that the Cowboys already, did their trades in April. I mean, that's a poor argument. I agree. But I think ultimately what did happen and the reason the trade were made is not some kind of, stubbornness or by the Joneses family as an inability to trade assets. I think it was more a function of, hey, Jalen Johnson, I'm interested in you, but how much? But you're basically a rental, and the Bears are asking for a second-round pick. That seems like a lot, and so the deals themselves just didn't make a ton of sense for what the Cowboys were looking for, and there weren't a lot of available players that necessarily moved the needle that the Cowboys were going to be able to acquire.
Were there any deals that you saw yesterday that got completed where you thought, I think I wish the Cowboys would have explored that one?
I mean, you brought up the Chase Young deal. I think that's the one that's the closest just because there's a huge upside swing there. I think if the Cowboys had a little bit less at that position already, and they didn't, haven't already traded a ton of their day 3 picks, I think I probably would be at least interested in kicking the tires on that. But as you said, I don't think Washington would have done that.
They would never have done it. They would have forced you to pay a whole round up on that.
Yeah, and so I just feel like some of these other deals, like they either don't move the needle enough, or they're putting players in spots where you already have guys that you would rather see above them. So I just think that the Cowboys are in a good spot with their roster. Now, I understand the visual of the fact that the 49ers are trading for these players, and that the Eagles are trading for these players, but at the same, yeah, I also think that those teams, despite being very good, had more pronounced holes at those spots than I think the Cowboys have. So I don't know. I think ultimately those moves, they're good and they're going to help those teams, but it's not going to be what moves the needle. And I don't know that the Cowboys making a trade at the deadline of what it was available was going to be what was the difference between them beating the Eagles or the 49ers this year.
I will say there was one trade that happened yesterday that I was like, oh man, I wish the Cowboys would have made it. And that was the Bills trading for Rasul Douglas from the Packers, because I think the Cowboys could use another outside cornerback. And I think Rasul Douglas would fit this scheme. What I liked about that trade is the Bills gave up a 3rd round pick, but got back Douglas and a 5th round pick. So you're getting rid of a pick. Yes. But you're really just moving down, and the Bills hope to be drafting 3rd round. That'd be like the 80s, maybe the 90s. And that 5th round pick might be like in the 140s, right? That would have been the deal that I would have liked, just because you did lose Trayvon Diggs. I still think Jordan Lewis is struggling a little bit in the slot. It just gives you one more solid cornerback option without having to give up a super valuable pick.
Yeah, the Douglas one actually, that one makes some sense too. Because I think corner makes sense. Like that's why the Jalen Johnson one made some sense if the price was right. Price was not right for Jalen Johnson and Douglas. Yeah, you're right. When you throw in the 5th, and you also consider where those two teams are probably going to end up, picking it by the time the draft comes around, that's probably just a round swap difference, right? That they did to make that deal. So, that one definitely makes some sense for sure. I think the Cowboys adding a corner to just to kind of refortify things, that definitely made some sense. But I also understand why they didn't necessarily didn't want to give up a 3rd round pick at this point. Even getting a 5th round pick, it's a lot. And so I think I probably would have bandied that one about as well. But I understand why they didn't necessarily get what they wanted there. That deal may not have been on the table for them as well. They may have been wanting to get Rasul.
Yeah, they might have wanted to get Rasul Douglas out of the conference or whatever. So I totally understand. I wanted the Cowboys to be aggressive at the deadline, but I don't think there was any deals that there wasn't a lot of players out there that I thought made a lot of sense for the Cowboys.
That's more the issue than anything, right?
And the Cowboys, they just don't have that many draft assets to give up, because I don't even think they know necessarily where their comp picks are going to end up because of the production of Connor McGovern, because of Dalton Schultz. So I still think they're waiting a little bit, because they could potentially get a 4th rounder for one of those 2 players. And I'm not sure you want to give up a 4th round pick for maybe somebody who's not even a starter for you.
You've got good enough depth that you're not just trading for the sake of trading, right? No. Like you're trading to get somebody that can move the needle. And then ultimately, if you're trading to get somebody to move the needle, and there's only probably 4 or 5 names that are even out there available that are worthy of moving the needle. 3 of them don't play of the position you need.
Yep.
It really narrows down the options for making a blockbuster trade. Sure. The 49ers and the Eagles had a little bit more pronounced spots that they felt like they needed to address. Look for the 49ers. They've been addressing defensive end several times.
I mean, that's why they went out and signed Cleveland Farrell. It hasn't worked. They went out and signed Randy Gregory, who did not record a single pressure against the Bengals on Sunday. I mean, they've been throwing things against the wall. It hasn't worked. I think this Chase Young move is going to work for them, but the reason they had to go out and do that is because they whiffed on a couple other moves.
Same with the Eagles. Same thing with the safety situation with the Eagles.
They signed Terrell Edmonds. It didn't work.
And that's part of the reason he was part of the trade. They were happy to get rid of him. So yeah, it's if the Eagles had taken care of that business earlier, like maybe the Cowboys had when they re-signed 3 safeties, then you don't have to make those kind of trades. You can hold on to your pick.
All right, let's answer one more Twitter question, including who is going to be a key player on Sunday in the matchup between the Cowboys and the Eagles. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying your tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your upfront total, so you know you're getting a great deal without all of the hidden fees. You can buy your tickets in a matter of seconds with 2 taps. I absolutely love Gametime. It's what I use to buy tickets. It's what you should be using to go buy tickets to this Cowboys-Eagle game in Week 9. Go fill up the link with lots of Cowboy fans. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Landon, our last question here from John. Who is one underrated key player to watch out for in the Cowboys Week 9 battle against the Eagles?
I'm going to go with Jonathan Hankins because I think, the one thing that, we take a step back from where we are right now to take a look at this Eagles team and where they were previously, right? I don't think this is the same team throwing the football that it was last year. AJ Brown is having an incredible year. There's absolutely zero doubt about that. But I just think that they still can get disjointed in the pass game at times and can be a little bit inconsistent. I feel like part of it, and this is me just blue skying, I feel like part of it has been they really aren't just including the tight end into the offense.
Dallas has gone missing, basically.
Yeah, and I think that that's really become an issue with their offense, and I just think it's kind of been disjointed at times. So all that's one way to say that I think that the one thing that the Eagles are continuing to do very successfully, as they were last year, is run the football. And I think that that's been a key in kind of continuing to get their game, specifically their offense, back on track at times when things have felt disjointed. Is that, they come back in the second half, they run the ball down the other opposing team's throat. They get kind of back in rhythm. It gets AJ Brown back in the rhythm. They can run more play action. They can get Hurts out of the pocket. So I think finding a way to really limit the run game is going to be key. And I think a lot of that is going to start with Jonathan Hankins, especially in keeping in mind that you're going to need a huge game again from a guy that has produced 2 incredibly great games, 2 in a row. You hope for a third. Bell has got to come in and really play on the level that he's played the last 2 games at linebacker. Mm-hmm. And I think in order for him to kind of be free to run and make the tackles that he needs against what is still a very talented, but slightly beat up Eagles offensive line, you're going to need Jonathan Hankins taking on double teams, eating things up in the middle. Mozzie's going to need to come in and play some strong snaps, the 15, 20 snaps that he gives you as well. I think it starts with that defensive tackle group up front, specifically with Hankins. If he has a strong game, I think you're going to see guys like Clark and Bell be able to flow to the ball very easily, make tackles, limit that run game, and then force Hurts to operate in the pocket, which that presents its own problems, and that's dangerous. But I think we can deal with that with the pass rush that we've got.
I'm going to go with Donovan Wilson. I believe he's like the 3rd or 4th highest paid player in this Cowboys defense after DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs, who's not playing, and then Stephon Gilmore. I think he's right after that. One of the reasons that you signed Donovan Wilson to a long-term deal is because he's a high variance player. When he's at his peak and he's playing really well, he can create turnovers. He can create splash plays. We haven't really got any of those this year. Like last year, he led the NFL in pressures from a safety, right? He was making a bunch of stops in the run game. They haven't really got that this is the time that they need Donovan Wilson just to be an awesome run defender, make plays against Goddard if they're going to challenge him in the passing game. I would love for this to be a big Donovan Wilson game, but if he struggles, I can see the Cowboys defense struggling to stop Hurts as well.
Yeah, I think, that's a great name, because I do agree with you that we haven't seen kind of the high highs that we've seen with Wilson in the past. I do think that, a portion of that is just him slowly coming back from a calf injury that he got on the very first day of training camp, right? I'm hoping that a week of extra treatment of not having to be on it is going to help him there. But I agree. I think, if you hope that Curse is going to be the guy that's kind of mostly the tight end eraser, you're going to have Wilson basically filling in with the rest. You're going to have Wilson kind of taking on running backs, especially in the running game, taking on running backs in the pass game. And then also kind of
spy for Jalen Hurts.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, is I think he's going to be a huge part of making sure that Hurts, is contained in the pocket. And when he gets out, he's going to be a guy that's going to be chasing after him from the second level. So another really important name from a guy that, that we signed to a big contract. We have high hopes for. Again, I don't think he's been a disappointment. I think he is still working back from an injury, but now is the time for him to kind of get that into that gear that we're used to seeing him in. Need him to kind of, force some fumbles, create some plays, create some variance, as he is so famously, known for doing.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we've got a crossover show with Gino and Lou from Locked On Eagles. You're not going to want to miss that. It is a lot of fun. Those crossover shows are always a delight, let me tell you. Make sure you go check us out on YouTube. We post shows every single day over there. Go follow our podcast. It's lockedoncowboys.com. We'll give you all of our podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm @Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.